Welcome, everybody. This is Ed Hightower. I'll be your host for today, and we're looking forward to a interesting presentation today, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but I'm glad you could join us. Feel free to send me any information you'd like. If you'd like to be added to the email distribution list, send your email to me either directly to ed.hightower@iotandbeyond.com or send it to me in the chat section or connect with me on the LinkedIn, on my LinkedIn profile. So we're looking forward to a great presentation today. And I wanted to thank our sponsors and supporters for their help and sponsorship. Gary Ramsey is my partner in this endeavor here, and I want to thank him for helping out and getting this thing set up. He's responsible for the slides and all. And he works with SoftWeb Solutions. It's an AvNet company, and he is responsible for helping us get AvNet support. And we used their facility for the longest time until the shutdown. So appreciate Gary and all his support that he's done. In addition, I want to thank Object Spectrum. Eric Lennington has started the company about 6-8 years ago and produces a software development, a rapid software development environment that allows you to quickly create minimally viable products in the IoT space. And it's based on micro services. So also want to thank M&A Technologies. David Bacon connected us almost a year ago now and has been supporting us along the way. They do a lot of interesting projects and solutions. So M&A Technologies is a interesting company and very thankful for their support. And finally, we have a new sponsor now, Hexa, H-E-X-A Global Ventures. Mr. Man Hamdan has been a successful entrepreneur for much of his life, and he's now started up this company here in Richardson. They're at the old Nortel Fitness facility on Greenville, actually, just north of Campbell. And it's a co-working space now, but he has a comprehensive set of services that he provides. So Kay Shaw has introduced me to them and brought them to us. Kay, are you online here? Maybe she can come on later on and tell us a bit about what's going on there. So with that, I want to thank our sponsors and Gary and all for their help and support. And now we're going to turn this over to Anthony Veri in a moment. Anthony reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and wanted to connect on LinkedIn. I looked at his profile and was impressed with all the things that he's done and is doing now. And we picked one topic of many that he could talk about, and that's how to create smart buildings and be able to manage and help mitigate this coronavirus pandemic and how it's going to be affecting businesses as people come back to work. So with that, I want to turn it over now to Anthony and let him introduce himself and start his presentation. Anthony, take it away.
Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on this morning to speak to everybody. Here, let me share my screen here. Okay, are you guys able to see the presentation?
Yes, coming through clearly.
Okay, good. So today I talked to Ed that I was going to speak on smart, healthy buildings, what it means, what technologies are being used in buildings today. You have your operational technology and your information technology, and who owns and controls the technology. Because when we're dealing with city buildings, commercial buildings, multi-dwelling units, you have different stakeholders that are responsible for certain aspects of the building. So it's always important to know what technology is in the building and who owns it. So I'm going to give you a little more background on myself and how I got into smart technology and smart cities, smart buildings, IoT, industrial IoT, and so forth. I came from a background in telecommunications and information technology, and several years ago, I moved into wireless technology, developing and designing and engineering point-to-point communication, point-to-multipoint communication that included microwave radios in licensed and unlicensed spectrum, Wi-Fi networks, indoor and outdoor, Bluetooth networks, and a variety of other frequencies I'll get into more as we progress. Currently, I work at Integrated Network Concepts. They're your standard systems integrator and managed service provider, and I came on with them almost 2 years ago to expand their business portfolio and the work that they do, and brought in and lead a division of smart cities, smart buildings, and wireless mobility. And that's where we're building more business, introducing new smart technology that a lot of people didn't understand or weren't using or didn't realize a use case on how it could benefit them, either becoming more efficient, more secure, or increasing their bottom line. So I'm going to start off with a little teaser here on smart buildings, fact or fiction. The first one I have here, I'll read. It says, smart buildings continuously gather raw data from devices and control a building's heating, ventilation, air conditioning, hot water, and lighting systems. The information collected is then transferred to a cloud, and the service provider analyzes and provides recommendations to solve potential operational issues. So the first one's a little tricky. It has a smart solution in there, but that does not make it a smart building. Operational technology has been around for decades in buildings that has been controlling the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and all that technology for years. Just because one solution can send some data to a cloud, and then you're relying on a service provider to analyze operational technology that generally if they're not developing or selling operational technology today, and they're just an IT firm that came up with a solution, they don't have the hands-on experience to know how the technology works or how it behaves or what to look out for. So sometimes I've seen solutions like this where building owners believe the marketing and then procure a solution, and then it doesn't work as they thought it would. And then they spend a lot of money and a lot of time implementing this solution, and they're unhappy, not satisfied, and sometimes they're back at square one because sometimes it can be so difficult for their facilities manager to operate and use that they just go back to their old habits and how they used to manage. Number two, smart buildings improve overall building efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, lowering operational costs. This is a fact, and this is one of the main reasons smart building technology came about, was not only to reduce the greenhouse gas and emissions, which is great, but it was the energy savings. Energy savings turns into hard dollars and cents. When you can reduce the amount that building owners and tenants pay for energy costs, and we're talking sometimes millions of dollars per year on a building in energy costs on larger buildings, that motivates them to really investigate these technologies, to be able to save that kind of money and spend that money elsewhere and to become more profitable. It always grabs the attention. Number three, smart buildings is a technology and service that allows one to track, monitor, and reduce energy use. That is what smart technology solutions do. But again, a lot of people confuse implementing one smart technology solution in a building and then thinking that building is now a smart building. So the third one is fiction. When we're actually talking about smart buildings will use multiple technologies, operational and IT, also have a vision related to the data that's being collected, privacy issues, cybersecurity, and using multiple smart technology solutions that are relevant to that particular building. All buildings we know are vastly different and serve different purposes for people, depending on if they're commercial, city-owned, or if they're residential. So we'll move on here. So here, just this outlines some of the building IT infrastructure that are in buildings and on top of buildings currently today. I listed them here. Obviously, most of this technology you're probably very familiar with. You have your standard routers and servers and switches. Wi-Fi networks are in there. A lot of buildings now have IP phones, and we look at the access control technology, wireless radio technology outside of Wi-Fi. On top of the roof, you might have a DAS system, which is a distributed antenna system, bringing in cellular in the building, so you could use your cell phone anywhere inside the building. Obviously, laptops, UPSs, and any other IP devices. This is considered IT infrastructure, and it's always key to be able to understand all the IT infrastructure in a particular building that you might have an opportunity in, or if your job is to maintain and monitor that building, having an inventory of everything that's connected and that's in the building is very critical to know and understand. So when we're talking about smart, healthy buildings, a lot of the momentum for smart buildings came from the OT side, and the operational technology side is enormous. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You have major players from Siemens, Johnson Controls, Distech, Honeywell, Bosch, to name a few of the big ones out there. And what they've been doing, besides selling operational technology to buildings, they also have software platforms and services that they offer to analyze, collect data, and to improve these HVAC units, all the utilities being used in the buildings, lighting networks in the buildings. And the problem is, when I came from the smart cities and IoT side and IT side and started designing and engineering smart buildings for customers that were asking for various solutions, I realized that the OT side really didn't understand that all the information that used to be analog, that they're now making digital and now is traversing over Ethernet networks. They don't understand IT networks. They don't understand Ethernet and how data travels, or how to monitor an IT network to ensure that the data is still connected, the availability of the network, cybersecurity. So yeah, they used IT to be able to get data from their old HVAC units, lighting networks, and to be able to monetize and make them more efficient, but they were lacking the knowledge on the IT side. So there's a large opportunity for IT professionals to get into smart buildings and really help the smart building players in the market now become more secure, become more reliable, build in redundancy, and ensuring uptime of these networks, and also introducing more technology, because right now just the four things I listed here are generally what OT companies in buildings were focused on. They didn't realize that there's also the IT side and a lot of front end technology that buildings are using. So if you could incorporate all this, it'll make a bigger impact for building owners and cities that own numerous buildings as well. Here I pinpoint some wireless technology that is being used in buildings today. A lot of these you probably have heard of before, maybe a few you haven't. So obviously we all know about cellular connectivity, Bluetooth. Most people are familiar with Bluetooth. LiDAR and Li-Fi is using light radar, and it's light that's transmitted, and it's the key component of this is it adds a lot more security, but it is only line of sight communication. So from an access point, imagine a Wi-Fi access point connected to your laptop. If your laptop does not have visibility of that access point with Wi-Fi, you will not have a connection. So if your laptop is in a cubicle and the walls of a cubicle are preventing line of sight from your laptop to that access point, you will not have any connectivity. But there's ways around that, and that's something for a different conversation on designing a Wi-Fi network. But it adds security to where those networks, because it's line of sight, it's hard to intercept and to intrude these networks. LoRaWAN. LoRaWAN is very interesting. Some of these here that I've listed are low power wide area networks, LPWANs, and LoRaWAN is the most dominant and popular LPWAN in North America currently. You have other players that are listed right below there, Sigfox and Weightless and Wi-Sun and Wirepass. Also, 6LoWPAN is another low power wide area network. All these have different protocols, but they all operate LoRaWAN, Sigfox, Weightless, and Wi-Sun on the sub 1 gigahertz frequency spectrum here in the United States. So we're talking about the low 900 megahertz frequency range. Zigbee, you'll hear more about Zigbee sometimes in industrial IoT. It's being used in smart homes. You may have heard it being used for smart light bulbs and some smart door locks. Z-Wave is predominantly used in smart home technology, but it has overlaid a little bit into industrial IoT as well. So these are some of the wireless protocols that I just wanted to introduce and go over because depending on what type of solution you may be presenting to a client or looking to implement in a building, each of these have different pros and cons. So it's good to understand what frequencies are being used and investigate them further or ask someone who works in these frequencies to assist, and it'll help you provide the right solution and one that works properly for your client, or if you own a building, for your building. So I've been designing and engineering smart buildings for almost 2 years, probably actually a little bit over 2 years. And it was key for me, coming from the IT side, to understand what building architects and engineers are doing. So I had to become familiar with the credentials and the certifications that buildings can get to receive tax credits and incentives, and to also reduce carbon emissions. A lot of cities around the world, and now you're seeing more in the US, are looking to reduce carbon emissions. And some of these standards here by LEED, WELL, and the newest one, RESET, are really providing a guideline of what you need to do in a building to reach certain certification levels, and what that impact does as far as energy efficiency, customer experience, carbon emissions, and so forth. So I listed here the 3 main ones. There are some other ones out there, but these are the biggest. LEED was first and is well known, and there's a lot of engineers and credentialed LEED certified practitioners. So that if you go to any of these sites, you could find out numerous information on all the different credentials and certifications. Now, these are key because a lot of buildings have outdated infrastructure, outdated technology in them. I think I saw a chart recently that said 70% of the buildings in the United States still have their original operational technology as far as energy consumption with HVAC and utilities. So that means if it isn't broke, they're not fixing it and they're not spending money to improve those technologies in the building. But that's going to change, and you're going to see that starting to change rapidly. In fact, there is a bill talk of potentially throwing in $1 trillion to update buildings in the United States and help them become smart and healthy buildings. We'll know more about if something like this gets passed near the end of this year. And if that does get passed, that throws in a ton of money that wasn't there before. That building owners and cities that own numerous buildings did not have the funds for, and especially after COVID with reduced budgets, this would be enormous to help kickstart and drive more innovation and more opportunity in smart buildings. I have a short video here from Hubble Lighting. This is regarding UVC light, and I'll talk more about UVC light after we watch this short video, and this will talk to you about how we can use light to disinfect and sanitize buildings in the US here today.
Introducing SpectraClean antimicrobial lighting by Hubble Lighting. SpectraClean luminaires leverage recent developments in the disciplines of lighting science and microbiology by combining white and narrowband 405 nanometer visible light. This innovation means
Anthony, most of us cannot hear anything.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not sure why the audio is not coming.
I added the link to the video on the chat.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, I apologize that a lot of you did not hear the audio on that. What that was illustrating is UVC lighting, and you may have heard some information regarding UVC lighting and how it's being implemented to combat and to disinfect or sanitize rooms and buildings related to COVID. What UVC lighting is, it is on the lighting spectrum, it is at a shorter nanometer spectrum than UVA and UVB, which a lot of our sunblock, you'll see on sunblock that says it'll block, putting on this sunblock will block UVA and UVB rays that could give you skin cancer over time and so forth. UVC is also dangerous to human skin if you're under this light, and it can cause burning sensation depending on the power and the intensity of the light. So when you use UVC lighting to disinfect and sanitize, no people and no animals should be in that room or in that building when these lights are on. Another caveat is the human eye cannot see UV light. So when we're using UVC light in buildings, when they're on, you can't tell that they're on. So a lot of the manufacturers creating UVC lighting, like Hubble lighting, GE has a UVC lighting option fixture. So does Vio, and also Igor. These are some of the top 4 lighting manufacturers using UVC light on the market today. And so when I design and engineer solutions that use this technology with UVC light, there's a lot of safety protocols and safeguards that I have to ensure are in place so that nobody gets hurt. We don't want these lights on and people in buildings and they're not aware because you cannot see this light. A lot of the manufacturers will have LED lights in a certain color. It could be blue or purple or red. And these LED lights will illuminate that the human eye can see. So when you know this specific color light is on the ceiling, you know that these UVC lights are on as well. But there's also wall-mounted displays and switches that have, some of them have little digital screens on them that also have an audible to where they could sound off a countdown, can warn people that these lights are coming on in the next 1, 2, 5 minutes down the road, and also flash the LED lights to warn people that they need to vacate that room because it's going to be disinfected. So a lot of it can be controlled from the wall. It can be controlled from your network operations center. It can be controlled remotely. But you have to look at the differences between the manufacturers to see which one you like and which one meets your criteria and specifications for the job opportunity that you're working on. The other caveat is the UVC lighting only will disinfect and clean what the UVC lighting hits. So how do you understand where the UVC lighting is penetrating if you can't see UVC lighting to begin with? Generally, like any light that would be up on the ceiling, anything that it can see that's line of sight, that UVC light should hit. So if you have a desk chair and it's pushed in under a desk, that seat of the desk chair will not see the light and will not be disinfected. So just keep that in mind if you're looking into UVC lighting solutions for disinfecting related to COVID and other viruses and bacteria. Because the more you know and the better you understand it, the better you can engineer solutions that will work and the better your clients will understand what solution that they're buying, where it's cleaning and where it's not cleaning. You could definitely reach out to me and ask me more questions about this because even though it might seem detailed, I'm lightly going over this. There's a lot more to it when it comes to UVC light, as far as there's 222 nanometer UVC light, 256 or 265. So what's the difference? That's more that I could talk about at a later time and get into more. But they're also, I wanted to bring up, UVC lighting is also being used in HVAC. So you might say, well, how or why would you use the light in heating and cooling? So what happens is these lights can be at a higher power and it could purify the air that's being recirculated in the building. So when the UVC light hits the air coming back from a cold air return, we have to know how fast the air is traversing through the ductwork, what UVC light is being implemented, and how powerful is that light, and at what power wattage is being used. So it has to be engineered and calculated so we could understand if the air is being disinfected or if the air is passing by too quickly and not being subjected to the UVC light long enough to actually do any sanitization. So on top of UVC lighting. There's also ionization and filtration with more HEPA filters. When I've done some smart building engineering and designs and smart solutions related to opening up buildings during our pandemic that we're going through now, I usually don't rely or push one solution to get a safety or a level where I'm satisfied that it's doing a good enough solution to clean or sanitize a building. I present out all the solutions and what I would recommend and tell what each one does and how it helps get to a point where you could say your building is at a certain cleanliness or disinfecting stage. And it's also good to then take all these smart solutions that you're using and display this information on visual boards so that people could see what you have spent time and money on to improve the safety of the building and the air quality and the surfaces so that people can be in the building and feel and trust that everything was done to the utmost extent to be safe. Right here on this slide, it shows a little bit of the technology that are being used in buildings, from the HVAC on the roofs or in boilers and chillers in the basements of buildings. Generators could be in the basements or on the outside of buildings, your control rooms, office meeting rooms, and your data centers. Data centers obviously can be on-site and off-site. A lot of companies and cities and buildings are using cloud. A lot of cloud providers out there, private cloud, and a lot of your big public cloud providers that we all know of, AWS, Google, Azure. And it's good to understand all the technology, as I mentioned earlier, in the buildings so that you understand what needs to be collected, monitored, and then when you collect data, data is just data. Until you scrub the data and find meaningful data, that's when it starts having value. And then from the meaningful data, you look for actionable data. What data gives you information that you can now take action on? And not in today's presentation, but maybe down the road, or if you have questions after, this is where we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning to take this actionable data, which a lot of companies are using actionable data to send to people to take action to remedy a problem, repair a device, repair connectivity, to where some of these actions can be done autonomously through artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's where we want to get to, is a point where a lot of these tasks can be done and be monitored by machines, and it alleviates humans takes away time from what they could be spending time doing other things that can be more beneficial for a city or for a building faculty. So this is a slide from partner Johnson Controls that shows a lot of the OT and what they focused on when they look at smart buildings. Again, it goes into a lot of the energy consumption through heating and cooling, and they do show a video surveillance here and some compute, but fire and smoke detection, the use of solar panels and collecting of rainwater. You'll see some green roofs that will have grasses and plants on the rooftop besides solar panels. Intelligent lighting and shades. There's smart film I've used on some buildings for multi-dwelling units where instead of having shades or motorized controllable shades, they have smart film on them. And the smart film can be opaque or totally see-through and transparent like clear glass. And that is just with a simple film that is put over glass and with a low voltage current that can be sent to this film. That is what will make that opaque film on the window become transparent. And there's interesting applications and obviously opportunities where that is highly needed and recommended, but a lot of people don't know these solutions are available. So I'll get into more of these solutions as far as smart buildings go as we progress here. This slide is just to quickly show how buildings and homes have been in the past and how we're transitioning using technology and trying to become more efficient and more aware. And so in the present, you'll see you have green buildings and smart buildings, but they're using technology, and that's been around. Like on the smart building section, you'll see video surveillance, access control, HVAC control. This isn't anything new. CCTV has been around for years, but now with intelligent smart buildings, or what I say is smart buildings is a broadly used term. I'd like to say you can only truly realize smart building technology through intelligent design. So we're transitioning to the future where we're taking the smart technology and we're using it to its utmost capabilities. We're using IP cameras now, and not only IP cameras, a lot of the top video surveillance companies have artificial intelligence built into the camera or into the cloud platform that they use, and it does amazing things. I've seen you're able to scrub video. So let's say you had an incident of a large theft in a building, and let's say in a hospital, and you find out later that $500,000 of medical equipment was stolen, and that the person was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. You have to go back previously and look at your archived video history on the video surveillance to try to look to see if you could find someone who met that description. And that could take days with numerous people on that job task. Now, artificial intelligence, you type in what you're looking for on the camera video surveillance files that you stored, and it could find that within minutes, maybe an hour at the most. So it's amazing what artificial intelligence and machine learning can help take technology that we've used for years and make it even smarter and benefit companies and cities and provide more safety, more security, and a better customer experience. On that future section here in blue on the end on the right, it also talks about POS systems. And there's a lot to get into there too if we want to talk about blockchain technology and more cybersecurity. But I think I'll leave that for questions at the end or another presentation. This slide quickly just goes over green buildings on how to be environmentally friendly, reduce carbon emissions versus smart building technology. That's on the right. And then below, how we progress to intelligent buildings. And then in the center is listed in blue the benefits of all these together and what we're looking to achieve as the overall goal. And the reason why we're doing smart technology in buildings today. The main reason I came here today was related to COVID. And because it's been a problem for us to open up buildings, companies and cities have closed buildings because they're trying to stop the spread of the coronavirus, COVID-19. So when I mentioned the UVC lighting, does help, but there's other things that we're instituting as well. So within the Wi-Fi networks and Bluetooth networks, we could do social distancing monitoring. So within a building, we could see where a concentrated area of people are, and then we could have either lights or an audible telling people to disperse or to send this information to security or the facility management of the building so that they could take care of that issue, or to notify the people that they need them to spread out. There's also solutions for elevators for touchless access control and foot pedals instead of having to push the buttons. There's touchless access control for doors, for bathroom doors, for entry into the building. That can be done with RFID, NFC, Bluetooth, and so forth. So we're looking at a lot of options that are touchless in buildings for water dispensing and soap dispensing. We've seen this in bathrooms for years, but now there's a bigger need for this technology to be implemented in more buildings than not. We have standalone stations that do touchless temperature scanning that can do it with thermal imaging as well. And these thermal imaging cameras can also send this information and then take other action. If someone did try to enter a building and they did have a temperature, it would stop them from entering and go to a side station to where they could get a more accurate temperature reading to verify if they have a temperature or not. And then if they do, they would not be granted access into the building. We have new touchless vending machines in buildings. So if people do not have masks to wear and they're required to wear them, they could purchase them with their smartphone or with their debit card or credit card and get PPE right on the spot before entering the building. So these are some of the new braking technologies that people are looking at and clients of mine are looking at and assessing what they want and what they want implemented. It's been interesting to see the interest level really peak to where I have projects going on that I can't even really give attention to because the interest has been driving more and more. Everybody wants to find our way back to what our normal used to be. And what we definitely want to do is implement technology that will help keep our buildings open and safe for people to get back in to work, into school, safely operate amongst people, and to prevent any potential shutdown in Q4 and in the future with any other pandemic that may come down the road. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. There's a lot more I could talk about, but let's see what you have as far as any questions regarding some of the technology and smart buildings that I went over here today.
Great, thank you, Anthony. So if you guys would like to ask a question, raise your hand. There's an icon on there for raise your hands. If you click on that, we can unmute you. You may be able to unmute yourself, but raise your hand and we'll, here we go. Yvonne, let me.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I had taken the headset off. Okay, I also put it in the chat. I don't know how you're doing it, but I guess my question is it cost effective for us to implement like HVAC solutions such as UV into our residential homes? And I guess the reason I'm asking this is, you know, a lot of people are working from home and spending more time at home. Or is it mostly cost effective for big commercial buildings?
It is more cost effective for big commercial buildings. I'm actually not too happy with the solutions that I've seen for HVAC for residential, and I would recommend against it.
Okay.
But there are room air purifiers that use UVC lights that do help, and it's always good to read. There's so many air purifiers for residential homes that can be used. There is one that I do recommend that does use UVC light. It's the Pure, P-U-R-E, air purifier. And that one does use UVC light in it. But there's also some other high quality air purifiers that you could look into that do filter the air very good and sanitize the air. with very advanced HEPA filters and ionization as well. So these do drastically help improve the air quality in your homes. There's also opportunities, and actually I've talked with manufacturers that I've dealt with in the past where they have UVC lighting boxes where you could put in your cell phone or your watch or jewelry or anything, and the UVC light will sanitize those objects. It may take an hour because they're not high powered, but there are some high powered UVC light wands that you could use at home or in your car. So there are some options out there, but what people don't understand, and when you see a UVC light wand or a box, they'll usually show it with blue or purple light. Those are the LEDs. You can't see UVC light at all. So you really have to look at the specifications of that device to find out what UVC nanometer spectrum that they're using. How many fixtures are they using that have the UVC light, and what wattage, what power is it being used at? Because some that use very low power and maybe one UVC light fixture, it's going to take a longer time to sanitize something that you're looking to sanitize.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I think I have one that uses batteries from a long time ago. That's probably not very good.
I would look to upgrade.
Yeah, I got it a long time ago. I guess a follow-on question is these HEPA filters or other supposedly filters or air purifiers, I don't think I've seen any that say they can combat viruses.
So there are some newer ones that do that. I have some, I know on my computer I could send you. Here, let me go to the slide over here. You'll find my email here.
Okay.
Feel free to shoot me an email, and I could send you some recommendations that I have of two that I've used that do that, and I could talk to you about those products. And I get no commission on selling them. They're third party, but they're ones that I would approve.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Yvonne. So Salomon Israel, if you would, I think you're unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thanks, Anthony, and appreciate the presentation and the information you're sharing. My question is related to, it seemed like a lot of the discussion to start with was on new buildings. I'm curious about what are the main considerations or main ways to approach this when retrofitting older buildings, and specifically I'm looking at schools.
Yes, schools is a very touchy subject because they do need help. And I've seen a lot of schools lay off teachers because their budgets were cut, and a lot of them don't have the money to implement some of these solutions. I will be frank and honest. One, I proposed to a high school that had about 2,800 students, and the solution for the UVC lighting in every room and in the hallways and all the network infrastructure to connect these IP LED lights as well was going to be over $1.5 million. So when it came to that, as soon as they heard that, they obviously said, thank you, but no thank you. So there is a balance, and it's a balancing act of trying to find the right technology at the right price that will be most beneficial. So this school is using Clorox, the 360 clean solution, where it's spraying chemicals in the room to sanitize rooms and desks and so forth. And that's using chemicals, but it is a much more affordable and effective solution, but you are using labor hours and people have to do this cleaning. So even though the solution's cheaper, you still then have to do the labor intensive act of that solution. Social distancing and PPE are some other things that they're looking into spending in the buildings as well. It is just very tough because the technology solutions out there with UVC lighting is pretty expensive. There are some that are more effective and cheaper that aren't PoE powered, that could just use the current wiring for the lighting network in the buildings. I could talk to you more about what manufacturers make lights that use current wiring in buildings to retrofit. And then there's a lot of wireless technology in those fixtures as well so that you can control them. So there's options to have more manual control to drive down the price, maybe to meet a budget of a client. And then depending on their Wi-Fi network in schools, there's E-rate funds, the letter E rate funds that schools are able to use to upgrade their technology and Wi-Fi in the buildings. And some of the newer access points have Bluetooth radios in them, and that can be used for a variety of things to see social distancing, contact tracing, how people are traversing in the buildings. And even when they're not connected to the Wi-Fi network, they could still be monitored. So HVAC with the UVC lighting and ionization and HEPA filters, that is a more cost-effective way to try to sanitize the air that's circulating in the buildings as opposed to the UVC lighting that is used in rooms to sanitize the surfaces.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Solomon. Now, Mario Vinta has a question. Gary, can you are very good. And then Roy Marino would like to ask a question after this. Go ahead, Mario.
Good morning, everybody. Anthony, good morning. Very interesting presentation. And my question is about places that I think represent a more challenging environment. Solomon talked about schools. There's also, restaurants, movie theaters, sports arenas, where controlling the way, not only controlling the way people behave, but also the amount of traffic and the origin of people that come in and out. Yes. Is much more diverse than the work environment and enterprise. So what is being done for such places? Do you know?
Well, I've seen solutions being implemented where they're upgrading technology and people are reserving seating in restaurants on tables that are open without even having to call in to the restaurant. And this way, time and people are allotted and secured, maybe with a hold, maybe like a $5 hold on a credit card, so they know that people are really interested in coming and not just taking up tables and seating and not showing up. So there's a lot of interesting caveats to all these solutions. I don't know of any besides the UVC lighting for movie theaters. I mean, I know you could buy tickets ahead of time and select your seating in some of the more updated movie theaters, but I haven't seen anything else as far as in movie theaters to help social distancing or high contact areas. I'm trying to think what else you mentioned, another besides restaurants and movie theaters.
Yeah, similar sports arenas, stadiums.
Yeah, sports arenas. The sport arena is probably the hardest one to have any solution where you could have people sitting in that close proximity in high volumes. And that's going to be a challenging issue until there is a vaccine. But what I try to tell people too is, even if it's, maybe a year that people and businesses and cities have suffered, hopefully once we do have a vaccine, these places and proximities can go back to a time where we are able to fill those arenas again, for music, for sporting events, for conferences. I used to go to a lot of trade shows and conferences and speak at those as well. All my speaking engagements were canceled for this year. They're looking at scheduling for next year. I don't know if that will happen or not, but we're all looking for solutions, and it's hard for cities and for enterprise they're in a tricky position with budget cuts or reduced revenue for the year. They really have to make sure that whatever they're buying, that they could validate the ROI or the safety that comes with the solution, because they're either using borrowed funds or funds in reserve that they may not even have to try to keep their business or city afloat.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Gary, can you unmute Roy Marino and let him ask a question, and then we'll do Robert Haldeman next.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello.
Roy?
Okay. Hi, Anthony. Appreciate your presentation. It's a very timely topic for sure. I've been thinking along these lines as far as maybe more like a smaller restaurant, smaller store type. And something I read that humidity, optimal humidity might be about 50% to potentially knock down the virus, any virus, and maybe potentially salt in the air or whatever could be something that actually kills the virus. Have you thought about those, or do you know anything about that? I mean, I know you mentioned ionization. I didn't know how that affects the virus too, but ideas like that are closer to the person and maybe in a smaller area.
Yeah, and so those are things that the salinity, the salt in the air is one that I don't have much knowledge on, but the humidity is, and a lot of my partners that work at Honeywell and Siemens and Johnson Controls, they have solutions for this that can automatically monitor and control the humidity. And these are things that aren't as expensive, especially in a smaller building or location as a small restaurant or a small business. I don't know, because I haven't dealt with small business owners as far as small square footage, on what type of control is offered on those, because generally if it's not a small building that they are in by themselves, it really goes back to the technology and the OT technology in the overall building if there were several businesses on the first floor storefront. So their options may be limited unless the landlord or the building owner allows them to improve the technology in the HVAC and filtration and stuff like that. A lot of problems have occurred where it's finding who's the stakeholder and decision maker and what is their motivation to make or improve the technology in their building. I've had large building owners that have not made any upgrades to their HVAC or their controls because their tenants pay the electric bills and the heating bills, and so they're not worried about it. They don't want to make the investment to only save their tenants money. Then the tenants, they would like to save the money on their electric and utility bills, but they don't want to improve the building, which they don't own, and if they leave it, they don't get to take that equipment when they leave. So sometimes it's a tricky time to try to get everybody to the table to make these improvements and upgrades, but you're going to see more legislation by cities, by states, and the federal government to finally move towards lower carbon emissions and smarter building controls because of the pandemic and because of our environment, to where there'll be legislation to where these improvements will need to be made. So it's looking brighter as we progress as far as what will be done and the opportunities and business opportunities in smart buildings. but I would recommend probably if it's a small business or a small restaurant, to look into the filtration, ionization, the humidity levels, and what vendors that they have already there, and then go to their websites and see what they recommend or what new solutions that they have. They might have economical upgrades that may benefit them.
So I guess, so what you're saying is humidifiers might be practical solution in a smaller area. How about, and I guess actually coming into right now, the humidity is pretty good because it's summertime, but once we get into the winter, it's going to be even worse where things are drier. So that might be more of a more helpful there. But how about ionizers? What do you know about do you know anything about ionizers, how that affects the virus in the air?
Yeah, so ionization has been around for a while, but it hasn't really stopped SARS or MERS or necessarily COVID-19. The UVC, but it does help. It does kill other germs and viruses and bacteria, and it helps eliminate them from the air to where they'll either fall to the ground or be inactive or necessarily killed. So a lot of, like, the UVC light itself, what it does is, imagine a high-powered laser. If you point it at a piece of wood, or it could set that on fire. What the UVC light does to the virus, the coronaviruses, is penetrate the cell wall and the cell membrane, and it heats up the cell to cause these reactive oxygen agents in there that prevent it from growing, prevent it from reproducing, and in essence, killing the virus. Now, everything related to COVID, the EPA in the United States isn't spending hardly any time validating the efficacy of any of these solutions. But what their guideline has been, if it was proved to solve or to combat other coronaviruses like MERS and SARS, there's a very highly likelihood of it also doing the same with the COVID-19. The EPA has been, and all the laboratories in the world have been focused on the vaccine. That's $1 trillion solution if the first one to come up with it. I foresee multiple vaccines coming. But the ionization isn't a true solution to kill COVID. But the more you do to sanitize the air, the better off you're going to be. Just like they say, a regular face mask necessarily might not filter COVID, and it could slip through that mask because it's so small. It does help, and it still can block. So ionization can stop some of it, but it won't necessarily kill and prevent all coronaviruses from traversing the air. I highly recommend the use of ionization, HEPA filters, and UVC light. And some of these air purifiers have them all built into one. And I've seen pricing from them anywhere between $100 to $400. And usually they'll say how much square footage that they'll purify the air.
So one more quick question. So how about, have there been any studies or anything about just using direct air and directing the flow, I guess, to the ground to get it out of the air as soon as possible?
If the air is, like, if it's blown air and the air vents are aimed straight down from the ceiling to the ground, it doesn't mean that the coronaviruses will just stay on the ground. They can then bounce off and like the air will flow and then not necessarily bounce, but after hitting the floor, it'll still come up to the whatever way it deflects off the ground. So just hitting the ground doesn't mean it will kill it, but some of it will lay on the ground and still be there, but not all of it. There's no proof that if it just hits a surface, that the surface will attract and contain the virus if it hits it.
Very good.
So is there any way to measure corona in the air? Or is that, I guess, I don't know. I know that's kind of out there, but.
So, and this is something that I asked probably about 4 months ago, because there's several solutions on the market that, one, don't work, and two, nobody really can prove that they don't work because it's so costly to test and to either swab test or do surface test. To one, you actually have to have the coronavirus in the building, which is potentially hazardous. And then you have to prove after it went through whatever disinfecting or sanitization, then you have to prove that that surface has been relieved or removed of that virus. So you do have to have almost like laboratory procedures and PPE on to do this type of testing. And I haven't seen many companies go through those steps to prove that at this point.
Very good. Thanks, Roy. Hey,
Thank you.
Move on and let Robert Haldeman ask his question. Gary, can you yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
How you doing, Anthony? Thanks for doing this. What type of data security protocols have you recently seen in these devices?
So when it comes to the lighting networks or some of the IoT sensors that are being used in the buildings, very minimal, and that's why cybersecurity is very important, that most people in the smart building industry, one, aren't aware of, and they're selling solutions without even worrying about security. That's sort of how like smart home technology happened too. People pumped out their products as quickly as they could, as cheaply as they could, and drive sales and business and worry about security on the back end or later down the road. And then we've seen a lot of attacks and technology that has been taken over, or with DDoS attacks, phishing attacks, and then leads to ransomware and so forth. The problem with when you get into smart cities and smart buildings is when you digitize this information and digitize and give access control to these technologies in buildings and in cities, you subject attacks not only to take down a network, but to shut down access control on buildings, so where people can't get in or out, or control the lighting or the HVAC to where it could stop them from working. And then if they put any reactive agent in the HVAC, it could lead to a lot of potential hazards and obstacles that we want to prevent from happening. So you bring up a very valid point that I try to not only talk to any client about, but I won't provide a solution unless we have cybersecurity topic as at the very forefront in the brainstorming of any solution, because you have to understand what's connected, and then you have to make sure that anything connected and any data in there is secure, and also look to build in redundancy and also replication and backup, and sometimes even manual override. Because a lot of the IoT devices are not secure. There's very few that I would recommend that are secure. And I didn't really get into much regarding all the IoT sensors that are being used in HVAC, but there's a lot of competing technologies using different wireless protocols to take analog data from the operational technology and send it back to these building automation systems, which they call BAS. And these building automation systems that control all the HVAC and operational technology, they were the ones who said, okay, you have a BAS system in your building, you're a smart building. but they didn't understand all the smart access controls, smart video surveillance, the smart front end platforms that can control maintenance, ticketing, rent payments that can be done on these platforms, Wi-Fi that can be provided to tenants. So building owners, I've given building owners the opportunity to become internet service providers for their entire building, to where they don't have multiple providers drilling into their building, putting in more infrastructure, and before you know it, you have 4 providers providing internet and connectivity, when the building owner could be the sole provider and also have an extra revenue stream on top of that. But that also leads to why IT is very important in smart buildings that I don't really see with a lot of my peers in smart buildings. They're on the building automation side and the BIM modeling, which is building information modeling, and you'll hear a lot about digital twins. They do all that well, but they don't understand IT. They don't understand data traversing over Ethernet and cybersecurity, firewalls. They don't understand antivirus, anti-malware, anti-phishingware, stuff like that. So cybersecurity is in desperate need to be implemented more and more in buildings as they become smart.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great. If anyone has any more questions, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you. At this moment, I don't see. There we go. Yvonne, you have another question. Can you unmute her?
Hi, Anthony. Okay, so this is kind of just like a thought. I've always thought about this. Okay, so after you sanitize an area, and I don't know if this is true or, but in my head, I've always wondered about it. So you sanitize an area, then somebody comes into the area and touches something or sneezes, so then it becomes unsanitary. Is that true? I mean, I don't think anything keeps something sanitized for, a long or a decent period of time, and I could be wrong.
No, you're absolutely correct. You're not wrong at all. Unfortunately, that's the biggest problem. And it's sort of like that with cybersecurity, where we implement cybersecurity software, we configure everything properly on the firewalls and on the routers and switches. We set up passwords, multi-factor authentication, and then the network changes or more infrastructure is added. Then it's not secure like it was before. The same with the sanitization. Once you sanitize something, it means you cleaned it at that point in given time, but if any new person or new bacteria comes into that room or into that building, it's no longer sanitized. And that's why I thought it was sort of a joke. I've heard some schools saying, we may send kids, divide them up. Some may go Monday and Tuesday, we'll sanitize the building Wednesday, and then the other half will come Thursday and Friday. I'm like, so you clean it for the people who come on Wednesday morning, but then Thursday morning, then Friday the building's dirty, and then Monday it's dirty from all the people there on Friday. So you're right. You can't constantly be cleaning, or can't always be safe. But I'll tell you something that I forgot to mention in the presentation. There is what they call a near UV light, which is it's in the 405 nanometer spectrum. Okay. Now this light is visible, that we could see with our naked eye, and it does sanitize and disinfect, but nothing as good as UVC lighting. So it's not going to kill any coronavirus like SARS or MERS or COVID, but it will kill some common germs and bacteria. So that does help sanitize while people are in rooms and in buildings, which is good. But right now, when people are looking to help resolve the issues from the pandemic, that's not a solution. That I tell people, yes, it's good and it'll help you have a healthier room or building. It's not going to help you related to COVID right now. So I just want them to understand that, and it is safe to be under the near UV light in the 405 spectrum, but it's not going to solve any coronavirus if that's what your client or your building or what you're looking for.
Okay, so I realize that this coronavirus is very airborne. That's one of the things. So I
Yes.
would think if you had limited funds, you would probably want to concentrate more on the ventilation and HVAC systems versus
Yes.
UVC lights. Is that if you had a limited amount of money and you wanted, you know, it to be as safe as possible, although we know nothing's 100% safe, would
Yes.
that be where you put your money?
Yes, I totally would. That's how I would prioritize it for sure. The other thing is too, if you're not wearing gloves, which hardly any of us are, all you have to make sure is you don't touch your nose, your eyes, or your mouth when you're in public places, and just using soap and water and washing your hands for a couple minutes. And I know a lot of us like to just throw soap on our hands and rinse the soap off really quick in 20 seconds. Right now, if you could, for the next foreseeable future, you spend a little more time with that soap on your hands. It does a better job, and it provides you cleanliness and disinfecting like you wouldn't believe. And that's something that we all use anyhow. It doesn't cost anything more. So you're right. It's the air that we breathe, and that's why a lot of people now are wearing masks. But on the surfaces, what UVC lighting on ceilings do, as long as you're not touching, and I mean, you'll be touching those surfaces, but as long as you're not touching your eyes, your mouth, your nose, and any openings that you may have, then it's not going to get into your skin. And you have the opportunity to wash your hands and then kill anything that's on your hands with any good hand soap.
Yeah, that sounds good. I don't know if you know, but ASHRAE had put out something. I haven't read it. A friend of mine sent me a link to it about how it touched on coronavirus, and I don't know if you've read it, but
yeah, there is.
Yeah, really.
So actually, we're trying to come up. Some partners of mine and I are trying to come up with smart building merit badges that use smart solutions, but also some of the standards like resets, well, or lead that actually work, and that we have data confirming building performance when it comes to air quality, air circulation and ventilation, air humidity, particles per million, what we're finding in the air. So instead of buying solutions that are unproven or you don't really have any metric verifying performance, we want to move to a more data-driven performance metric that will reward buildings to where they could receive tax credits from the federal government or the state confirming their performance, and they implemented a solution that actually works.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good idea. And I think that'd be a good idea to spend all this stimulus money or, you know, government federal spending for corona problems. But I agree with you on that 100%.
There is money being spent. There are businesses and building owners that have hundreds of millions of dollars. And to tell you, there was one business that, you know, let's say they had 100 buildings that have spent $10 million just on signage in the building telling people to social distance.
Oh.
So we're talking $10 million for paper and acrylic to tell people to social distance. So if they have that kind of money to spend on literature and verbiage on walls and on the floor, there are opportunities that businesses have even more money to actually disinfect and help sanitize the buildings.
Yeah, a lot of people don't pay attention to that signage. I mean, from what I've seen when I have to go out to the store or something.
Yeah, they'll look at it and then move on.
Yeah, they'll be like right next to me. I'm like, hello. Okay, I don't have anything else.
Thank you, Yvonne. Very nice. So does anybody else have another question? This has been awesome. Thank you, Anthony. This has been very good. Kind of waiting here to see if we have anybody else raise their hand that would like to ask something. But very informative. Anthony, you want to wrap up? Anything else that you want to throw out and share with us?
So I'm trying to think of anything else. Obviously, with a lot of the smart buildings, everything I was working on smart cities was basically put on hold when COVID started becoming more rampant in the US. And I'll just end with, there are some common things that have been around that people may not be aware of that help in buildings. One is there are metal door handles and window handles that are antimicrobial that will kill basically any germ or bacteria that lands on them will be null and void, and they can't live on that surface. But a lot of building owners didn't want to spend an extra $2 to $3 on the antimicrobial door handles because it was an extra cost, and they didn't see any value of it because there was no pandemic or any real worry of catching any virus or bacteria that way, or virus. So look into antimicrobial door handles and locks. That's an easy retrofit that you could replace if there's any need for any office you're working in, or at your home, or at any school. That's something that isn't too terribly costly that can help, because we're all touching door handles and not so much windows, but the door handles for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Great information. It looks like there's no more questions. So Anthony, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. Awesome information, and thank you for sharing and giving us insights into the different aspects. This has been really a very fun and interesting presentation. So thank you very much. And FYI, guys, we've been recording it. I'll edit it down some and then send it out to my distribution list, or my email distribution list. If you're not on that list, if you're not getting my emails, feel free to send me an email at ed.hightower@iotandbeyond.com, ed.hightower@iotandbeyond.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And then you see Anthony's information up there as well. So it looks like he'd be glad to work with you, answer any questions you have, and advise and help try to move us all forward in this pandemic.
Yeah, Ed and Gary, thank you guys both for having me on. It was a pleasure being on here and talking regarding some smart and healthy buildings. Anybody, feel free to reach out to me. I've worked over the past 5 years with hundreds of manufacturers around the world dealing with IT, IoT, and other smart technology and cybersecurity. I'd be more than glad to help anyone or discuss any other solution or topic that you may have interest in or an opportunity in. Awesome.
We'll have to have you back then maybe later this year or next year and give us an update on how things are going and what you're up to at that point.
Yeah, and I do have projects routinely in Texas, so the next time I am in town and traveling, I'd definitely like to meet up with you and your group if available.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. Let us know when you're coming down, and maybe we can set something up. We hope to be meeting in face again before the end of the year, or just after the first of the year, hopefully.
That would be great.
Awesome, awesome. With that, I guess we'll close for now. Take care, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Anthony. We'll be stopping the recording and ending the meeting now. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gary. See you later.